Well, good afternoon. I call the February 10th meeting of the Commissioners Task Force to order. The meeting will be live streamed on YouTube so the public may observe and listen. And welcome to everybody that is online, and appreciate all of you being here today. As a matter of personal privilege, I want to introduce a new member. Kathy Hopkins is a new member of the State Board of Education, and she's joining this group. Kind of give us a wave there, Kathy, and we'll welcome you to the group today. Okay, thank you. And today's agenda has been provided. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? If not, a motion to approve would be in order.
So moved, Melissa Rooker.
And seconded by Janet Eaton. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. I guess I ought to wait if I'm going to give you opportunity to discuss. And you have the minutes of January the 6th. Are there any additions or corrections to the January 6th minutes? If not, a motion would be in order to approve.
Adam Thomas, so moved.
Adam Thomas.
Bert Lewis, second.
Okay, and Bert seconds that motion. Look, there were numerous seconds. We'll give it to Bert. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Thank you. And now it is Doug, we're waiting for you, I believe.
Okay, welcome everyone. We'll get started. I apologize ahead of time if my changing slides takes a while, but I seem to have been running a little slow yesterday afternoon. We'll hope it speeds up today. First on the agenda are the ESSER II changes. As we look at those, there's 19 districts that submitted ESSER II changes. Total value is 5.8 million, but it only results in about a $400,000 use of more money or more funds. So not a lot of money going out. As we go through these, I'm gonna go fairly quickly because you'll notice that a lot of these are just for small dollar amounts. And so it's districts using up what's left of their ESSER II funds. Basically, well, they are adding them to previously approved line items. So it's their allowable uses, but just using up a few dollars here and a few dollars there. Greeley would probably be an exception. They're using up the rest of their allocation for an HVAC project. Waukene is moving some money around for premium pay and salaries. Uniontown, $3,000 uses up the rest of their allocation, and they'll tack that on to some of their premium pay that's already been approved. Next one's Twin Valley, $43 was all they had left, so that uses up the rest of theirs. Palco, $869, Wheatland, $30. So just adding those few remaining dollars to already approved items to use up the rest of the ESSER II allocation. Royal Valley, $3,700, Valley Falls, $2, Jeff West, $2. Belle Plaine uses up the rest of theirs, $2,000. Sublette, $18,000. Peabody Burns, $874. Did I skip one, or I think I did? Got ahead of myself, I think, here. Give me 1 second. Yep, we did those. Let me.
Yeah, we did those.
Sorry.
This is one of those times you just thought you made a mistake.
Yeah, I know, I guess. I was thinking there was a big one on the next slide. So we got Riverton, Morris County, Meridazine. Riverton's the biggest one, that $15,000 going towards premium pay. Here's the big one coming. So Baser, $153,000 uses up the rest of their allocation. That's going towards premium pay and salaries. Heston, 14,000, salaries and technology. Eudora, 27,000 for curriculum and technology. And then Flint Hills is the last one, $600 added onto their premium pay. Like I said, at the beginning, about almost a $400,000 is the net change between these. As we look at where we are cumulatively, sitting at about 75% for that teaching and learning. So as I went through these and you're looking at the small dollar amounts, all of this money, ESSER II, needs to be encumbered by September 30th of this year, 2023. We are asking the task force to consider setting a deadline of when all of those ESSER II changes should be submitted. We would throw out June 1st as a date to put out to the districts that all ESSER II changes need to be submitted by. That gives them July, August, and September to make sure everything's encumbered. And then December, everything has to be liquidated by. So just to spur people on and get it on their calendars, we'd like to set a deadline for June 1st for all ESSER II changes. And you all can think about that and maybe next month come back and we could get a ruling on that.
Okay, let's let's get that on the agenda so that we'll know that in advance. Okay, are there any questions or comments concerning any of the ESSER II change requests?
Mr. Porter,
Yes,
This
I do
is
have a quick
Bert.
question, if I could, Jim, as a,
just a second.
newbie in the
Bert, and
middle
then
of
Kathy. Go ahead,
okay,
Bert.
sorry.
no, go ahead and let Kathy go first. It's fine.
Okay, go
I'm
ahead, Kathy.
So I wasn't trying to jump on anybody. I was curious about the changes on one of the districts from summer school supplies. And I changed to a lot of different things, but I don't know, caught my eye that instead of doing more on the summer school, which to me speaks a lot to learning loss, that they had cleaning supplies and many different things. But I was just curious how we're looking at all of that when they're submitting their changes.
So
Just a curiosity mostly.
I can try to answer that, but the task force has given us the leeway that as long as it was an allowable activity and went before the task force previously, that we could just go ahead and okay those pretty much. These changes are more informational unless there is something that's new that the task force has never seen before. The learning loss really comes into effect in ESSER III. So ESSER II didn't have that requirement. That's what we like to see, obviously, but as far as really calling it out, ESSER III is where that comes into play. If that answers your questions.
Okay, Bert.
I guess I would rather be proactive than reactive. So I was hoping with Chairman Porter's permission, I could make a motion to go ahead and set June 1st. That gives them 4 months, first 3 months.
Let me think about that, Bert, and we will at the very end we will discuss whether or not we want to do that. Typically, I prefer to give everybody a period of time to think about something before we do it. Present it 1 month and do it the next month, but we will consider that, and then whatever is the opinion of the group, we'll go ahead with it. So you will have the opportunity to make that motion, and we'll see where it goes from there, but we'll do that at the end of the meeting. If there are no more questions about the ESSER II changes, in order to approve, a motion to approve the ESSER II changes would be in order.
I'd make that motion, Mr. Chair. Adam Prophet.
Okay, Adam, thank you. And that is seconded by Bert. Okay, any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. And we'll go ahead. Doug?
Okay, so moving on to the ESSER threes. We did want to kind of start out with this slide, just to reinforce the purpose of the task force and all plans going before the State Board of Education for approval. Our team reading them and rereading them, et cetera, to make sure that districts are doing the right thing and keeping everybody out of trouble or avoiding it if we can. Wanted to put this up because we did have a instance in the last couple of weeks where we received an email from the Department of Education asking us to follow up on some information they had received about one of our districts. And they, as part of the email, they sent us the board minutes from that district. And if you read the board meeting minutes as they were published, it appeared that the district was not following the capital improvement, the Davis-Bacon, all of those requirements that go along with construction. And so the Department of Ed asked us to follow up on that. We did follow up with the district, and we believe that it was a misunderstanding, but the way that that was put out to the public in their board minutes certainly raised some questions. So just to remind everybody that the feds are paying attention to what's going on. Where they got their information, we're not sure. Whether somebody reported something to their hotline, whether they just as a matter of their job are looking at district websites. We know they do that because they check for the back to school plans, take a look at those, make sure that everybody is posting the things they're supposed to. So just wanted to reinforce the purpose of your work as a task force and the boards in approving all of these plans.
Melissa, you have a question?
Yeah, just real quick to just clarify again and reinforce that the purpose of this task force, as I have always understood it, is not to get involved in value judgments about choices districts are making about how to use the funds, as much as it's compliance, making sure that there is a robust review process in place to ensure the funds are being used within the federal allowable use guidelines as that layer of protection. Is that the right interpretation, or could we better define the purpose of our meetings?
That is consistent with my understanding that our job is to make sure that all the money is being spent in an allowable fashion in accordance with the regulations set forth from the federal government, to make sure that at some point in the future, there will not be the questions about whether or not it was spent correctly. So this is a layer of accountability
An oversight,
is
right?
not required, but has been established by this state to assure that money is being spent as it is supposed to be.
So the value judgment resides with the local boards and the decision-making process involved with creating their ESSER plans, correct?
Yes, yeah. Our job is to make sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, our job is to make sure that that money is being spent as in one of the allowable areas, and the local board of education makes the decision specifically within that framework of how that's done in that school.
And then
So-
there's follow-up reporting required from the districts, and we track that in the quarterly ESSER and Eames federal expenditure reports.
Is that
So-
correct, Doug?
It's allowable, it's allocable, and it's reasonable. And so the reasonable piece sometimes is where some of our judgments come in. And that's why we deny some things, or we request that they redo them. I think we've talked about the $350,000 school bus, the Taj Mahal of playgrounds, those kinds of things that it seem to be a bit excessive. Are they reasonable for and going towards what the funds were intended for, making sure that the districts are following the rules as far as what they have to do in order to access these funds, those kinds of things. You mentioned the reporting. The quarterly reporting is a state requirement, and then the feds have us do an annual report that we are in the middle of right now. Districts are giving us that information as to how the money has actually been spent. This is after the fact. We're collecting it. These plans are up front, what they intend to do, and then the reporting is what they actually did with the money. And so the Fed reporting is very extensive. So even more so than I think what the state is asking. They align pretty well, but they're asking a lot of information. There's a lot of scrutiny on this money.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? If not, let's move ahead.
Okay, so moving on to ESSER 3, we've got 21 districts that have new plans before you. Those represent $18.6 million. And then we've got 18 districts that have submitted ESSER 3 changes. And that'll make their total plans 38.9 million, but the net change is about 6.8 million. As we look at where we're at this point, the task force and the state board have approved 198 plans worth 617 million. You're going to look at 21 new ones today for 18.6. All plans have been submitted. We have 67 plans under some phase of review. Of those 67, all but I think a dozen of those have made it through secondary review or to secondary review, but have been sent back for more details or more information. But there's only 12 of them that haven't been seen by everybody on our team at this point in time. So we had set a goal to try to have everything to you all by March. 67 maybe pushing a little bit, but I think we're getting there.
Yeah, I'm assuming though, after we approve or don't those 67 plans, we will still occasionally, maybe not monthly, but occasionally, there will be continuing change requests, I would assume, but probably at a decreasing level.
Yes, we definitely expect changes coming ahead, but as long as there's nothing new and they're just moving money to different line items, I mean, that's what we've been giving you all in the ESSER 2 changes, is just keeping you abreast of what's happening with the money that hadn't been planned for.
So the heavy lift is going to be over probably in a month or two.
Oh, fingers crossed.
Okay.
Then the
I'll interrupt
monitoring.
him. Go ahead.
So as we look at today's slate, these districts had 21 million at their disposal. Plans represent 18.6 million. The ranges per district, 76,000 is Tri-Plains at the bottom. Leavenworth is the top at 8.1 million. And then the expenditures per student, 626 is Fort Leavenworth, and then the 2,400 is Leavenworth. And then it's 96% of the items in this batch fall into those teaching and learning buckets.
Okay,
And then if we look at cumulative with these plans included in there, we're setting at about 81% for the teaching and learning pieces. You can see the 18.6 added there, so 635.7 million will have been approved after this.
which leaves 132 million in those plans that have already been submitted.
Right.
Okay. Questions or comments about ESSER 2, ESSER 3, new applications? Well, then let's talk about ESSER 3 changes.
Okay. Okay, so Greeley, they're going to use up the rest of their allocation. They have an HVAC project that they got their paperwork turned in for, and so it's ready to go. That's a pretty big expense. Turner, also a big HVAC project, 1.7 million on that one. That uses up the rest of theirs. Marmaton Valley, $9,700 for curriculum. Humboldt, 42,000 for online enrollment and after school programs. Clearwater is just moving some money around amongst some already approved items. Wakanda, 36,000 for salaries. Oakley, 99,000 for curriculum and after school programs. Hutchison, another big one, doesn't use up all of theirs, but gets close. HVAC and capital improvements. Ellsworth, 3,000 for added to premium pay and salaries. Concordia, 51,000 curriculum and salaries. And then Clay Center, 150,000 for HVAC. Altoona Midway, just moving money around to pay for substitutes and some premium pay. Ellis, 255,000 for salaries. Lyons is moving some money around for their after school and summer programs to pay for teachers. Marion, 115,000 for curriculum and salaries, and then Copeland, 109,000 for salaries. And then the last two, Liberal, a big HVAC project, 2.1 million. And then Kismet Plains, 135,000 for curriculum and professional development for a net change of 6.8 million. And so when we look at the cumulatives, if we add in the changes today, that's going to leave us with 125.6 million. It drops our teaching and learning down to 80%. As you notice, there were quite a few big HVAC projects in there that don't go into the teaching and learning pot. So, and I think one thing I want to mention that I forgot to when we were back on ESSER 2, we were down to, I think it was 2.4 million left there. And I think Chairman Porter said something about that was, well, never mind. Anyway, that 2.4 million that's left, about $1 million of that is in Garden City. So almost half of what's remaining that's unspoken for in ESSER 2 is in Garden. So the other 1.4 million is spread out amongst numerous districts, but I did mean to mention that when we were back on ESSER 2.
Well, if you hadn't, I was going to, so.
Oh, okay.
I noticed, I found it interesting that one of the school districts on that list where it tells us how much is left had $1 left in their total allocation. I think I could have found someplace to put that. Randy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doug, back to Kathy's comment around learning loss, because ESSER 3 has that. How, I know internally how we're tracking it. How will we show that specifically within the ESSER 3 so that people can see here's how much is going to teaching and learning, but the question is going to be asked, if not by this group, but certainly the legislature, I think, when we go over show us the 20% learning loss and how are we tracking that?
So in the application that districts fill out, it actually districts have to set aside 20% of their ESSER 3 allocation for learning loss. And so the application actually figures out what that dollar amount is. And as the districts submit their line items, they check whether they believe it fits in that 20% learning loss category. We review those at least 2 times, primary and secondary review, to make sure that those items that they have tagged as learning loss actually meet the criteria. So we're checking it on the front end to make sure that they are using that 20% of their funds for those purposes.
And I assume, Doug, that that's a pretty strict interpretation, kind of like, we were talking earlier about whether I was an outdoor baseball facility, we've been pretty strict on that when someone says this is for learning loss, you're looking for something like after school tutoring, summer school, additional staff during the school day, just something along those lines.
Yes, a lot of districts, most districts have before and after school programs. Most of them have summer schools going. They've hired extra paras to work with students. Part of that 20% learning loss is also that you are focused on the most impacted subgroups, populations in your district that have been affected by COVID. So it specifically calls out EL students, special education students, migrant students, homeless, foster care. And I know I'm leaving some out, but all of those are specifically called out, and we want to know how you're addressing those populations. So as we look at the items that people put under 20%, if it's an item that benefits 100% of the students, then it's really not geared towards those with the most that COVID had the most significant impact on. So that's what we look at. So when people buy curriculum, a brand new curriculum for math or ELA, we've been pretty strict on that. Doesn't benefit just a small group of students, that benefits all. So you can, that's an allowable use, but that fits under 80%, not 20%.
Thank you, Doug, because I want to give a couple of examples if I could, Mr. Chairman. So real kudos here to Adam Thomas. He asked me to present to House Education about ESSER funds, and I thought that went really well. In the Senate, I was also asked to do that, and a statement was made. It wasn't asked in the form of a question. It was just said, well, they're not spending enough on learning. It was a general statement, and then they're not spending enough on learning loss when they were looking at a specific category, and it wasn't a question, so there was no chance for me to respond. But that's one of the reasons I asked, because I know someone's going to look at like summer learning, and if it's not 20%, they're going to jump maybe to the wrong conclusion that that's the only place you can see learning loss. So it's one of the reasons I ask.
Okay, thank you. Melissa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if the team that compiles the quarterly report should add a section that speaks to that specific ESSER 3 requirement. Because if we have data through the approval process, which we do, of what specific choices are being made, there's contextual information that might put that into perspective that could be added to that report to specifically address how that's being handled by districts. And we'll beg forgiveness for the superintendent's listening, but I would imagine a question could be added to the quarterly report that needs to be filed, asking for a description from them of activities they've engaged in.
Or what may be already in the
It
application.
could,
right,
yeah.
Doug? And we might just ask for some sample examples that we could give those quotes around, Melissa, so it highlights it.
I would recommend that. Those reports run, there's a lag because it's reporting the expenditures. So it's always reporting on a quarter behind the quarter. So anyway, there's some lag time, but I think they're getting, from a timing standpoint, they're beginning to report on ESSER 3 spending. So it might be a good idea to tailor it. That would be my recommendation.
I think that's both reasonable and proactive. Anything else before we continue? Seeing none, let's move ahead, Doug. I believe it's time. Yeah, I believe it's at this time a motion to approve ESSER 3 applications and change orders would be in order. Melissa makes the motion. Is there a second? Brad makes the motion, seconds the motion. Any further discussion? If you're a member, would you make sure your cameras are on so I can see the vote? All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And now we have had a request from a member to update us on the EANS process, and so we'll do that now.
Okay. So Doug, do we really have much on slides at all other than one slide?
Just this one slide, Tate, it's all up to you.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. I was just double checking. So there's going to be two of us providing updates. I'm going to provide updates on changes that have happened over the period of time since EANS 1 and EANS 2 were approved. And then Dean Zeitz will talk about the funds that technically were reverted to the governor and then sent back to KSD, of the ones that were not geared toward our private school buildings through the application process. So since we started the process in spring of 21, spring of 21, we approved EANS 1, then that fall we approved EANS 2. We've had almost 300 change requests. 221 have been approved for a total increase of $1.6 million in those changes. To let you know what that kind of includes, a lot of times it's price increases where a quote was received early on, but by the time it got ordered, the prices had gone up, or maybe the school had also increased where they had 20 students that we might have been getting a license for. We ended up with 24, 25. So we've seen a lot of things like that. Things that were back ordered for long periods of time. There were change requests to maybe purchase something slightly different for the private schools, maybe a different computer model. cetera, different type of curriculum. We've done that. Some positions that were going unfilled, we were asked to rework them so we could get positions filled. Maybe they couldn't find full-time positions, so we made it to part-time, or maybe there was 2 part-time and we changed it to full-time just based on what was available. Some items that number does not include in that 1.6 million is anything that the private schools requested and have not received yet, whether it's back ordered or whether it's for summer school of 23, school year 23-24, summer school 24. So we know there'll be some changes as things happen during that time. We also know there are some positions that haven't been filled. So some of those could be possible change orders or may never be filled. And then another big item that does not appear in that change in the $1.6 million is because of some of the positions going unfilled, we felt that we solidly could give the employees that were already employed to provide services for us in the private schools pay raises for the 2022-2023 school year. So those are some updates of how some of the fund services have changed that we are providing through our service centers to the private schools. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dean Zeitz to talk about the funds that were reverted to the governor's office.
Right. Thanks, Dave. And so just as a brief reminder too, that while all of EANS 1, we were able to utilize 100% for supporting the private schools that originally received services through that program. Congress wrote EANS 2 a little bit differently and included some additional provisions as well as a ticking clock that I'm going to talk about here in a second. But with EANS 2, with the extra restrictions that limited the number of private schools that were even eligible to participate to those that had, among other things, had to have at least 20% poverty and had to have foregone taking advantage of the Paycheck Protection Plan round 2, which disqualified a lot of our private schools between those 2 factors alone. There was a couple other things as well. But even with that, we were able to qualify. We had 26 private schools that applied, and everyone who was eligible was awarded services. Services worked out to a little over $2,769 per student over the approximately 2 years that the services will be continuing with the budgeting that we put in to meet all of the requested eligible services that were requested. But even with all of that and providing all of the eligible services that are requested, that only would utilize a portion of the $25 million that was our EANS 2 award from the U.S. Department of Education. That left approximately $10.9 million that even after a generous budgeting, we weren't able to account for with what was asked for. But the ticking clock that Congress put into the law required that within a year of us having been awarded the funds to either allow them to be reverted to the governor's Education Emergency Relief Fund, or we would revert back to the U.S. Department of Education, and Kansas would lose access to those funds altogether. Under so in concert with the governor's office and the U.S. Department of Education, we did exercise the option to revert the $10.9 million that otherwise would have gone back to Ed. It got recategorized as gear money, which basically just puts it right back here to KSDE. But the nice thing about this, which is different from ESSER or the other public relief funds, is that gear is able to also benefit non-public students. So $6 million of it, the vast majority of the funds, went into expanding the Sunflower Summer Program, which is open to all students, pre-K through 12th grade throughout the state. And that's all students, public and private, and it is heavily, and we have data shows that it's absolutely been utilized by public and private. In addition, the other major investment went into the Kansas Preschool Pilot. Again, that's a public and private partnership program serving all students, or is open to all students in both private and public throughout the state and supporting early childhood. And then a few other smaller things, but again, serving both public and private. So keeping the intent of the funds to support both public and private students throughout the state. So just a little bit of a recap on where things are with that. And I think with that, back to you, Chairman Porter.
Okay,
Unless
thank
there's
you.
questions.
Go ahead, Janet.
Yes, I just want to make sure I understood that. The Eanes one, you were able to use all of that for private schools?
All that remains available for private schools, yes.
And has it all been used up?
It's not all been drawn down yet, but it's all available for private schools.
So maybe Justine, a different way of saying that, has it all been spoken for? I mean, every dollar has got a.
Gotcha. Yeah, we can't use it we can't serve additional schools with it, but for all those schools that were eligible, this gets to what Tate was talking about earlier. The services that were requested, we'll be able to continue to provide through the end of this year, because that grant expires on September 30th of this year, and so the funds will continue to carry us through there to keep those folks employed and provide the services that were requested.
The way I understand the question is, has all of the ESSER Eanes 2 funds been allocated? And I believe the answer is yes. Is that correct?
For both the Eanes 1 and Eanes 2, that is correct.
I want to ask it one more time, just so I don't think we're asking the same question. Of the money that was set aside for the Eanes 1, did every dollar of that amount get requested and given out, or was there money that did not get requested, did not given out, and is no longer able to be given out?
I'm not sure if I completely understand the question. So Eanes 1 is a little bit different from any other federal education program that Kansas or any other state has ever received, because it is money for the provision of services to private schools, and it's administered by the state. So what we can't do is we can't actually award the funds directly to a private school. And I know you know that, Janet, but
Right.
It's for the benefit of everyone else. So it's a little unusual too, in that the awards, the application from the schools and the awarding of the services all happened back in 2021, but of course they carry through to the end of 2023. And again, working within the constraints that Congress and the U.S. Department of Education set out, the private schools at the time that they were applying were encouraged to basically ask for anything and everything that falls within those eligibility categories to meet the needs of their students immediately and to respond to the pandemic. Based on what they asked for, budgeting that and those services being requested through 2023 through the end of this year, we and this task force had a budget created that was kind of parsed out by everything from the staff to the kinds of items, et cetera, and was budgeted in such a way that we believed it would reasonably get us there to the end based on what everyone requested. So not every dollar has been liquidated and drawn down, but we're on track to expend all those dollars as we're providing those services through the end of 2023.
Okay, and then one other question on that Eanes 1. Did I hear you say September 30th? So the teachers that are under the 22-23 school year could really be employed into the following school year?
Now, with federal funds, the teachers who are employed by the public service centers that are providing those Eanes 1 services in the private schools, those services will have to end no later than September 30th of 2023, unless it was a school that also applied for and receives the same services under EANS 2 to pick it up for another.
Yes, so
another
that goes to my question is, could we employ them for the first month of the 23-24 school year if we're starting school in August and that money is through the end of September?
Not, we can't continue services for if a school was.
I'm not trying to
Service-
continue
okay,
them.
go ahead.
I'm
I'm sorry,
just
go-
saying, if it goes through September 30th, can we keep them employed until September 30th?
No,
No.
because
you-
it's through summer of 2023 and summer of 2024 because of the contracts that they would have to have with the service centers. Typically, we don't do teacher contracts for 1 month. And we
Okay,
probably would not have enough money to do that with health insurance and everything included, because that was not budgeted in.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Nick, am I missing something? I know you're on.
And next.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nick.
Most of my questions are dealing with Ains 2 and forward. I understand Ains 1 is all squared away and was accounted for, and that private schools can participate in some programs jointly with the state. However, I'm not too sure, with meeting with last week with some administrators, if they know exactly what those services and programs they could join due to the Ains Ains monies that were put into those programs. Many of them understood about the summer programs, but they weren't sure about others. So if we could have a list to make sure that some of those opportunities are out there for private schools, so we can give it out from either you guys or from one of us, to making sure that list is comprehensive and complete, so everybody has the same information. On Ains 2, though, the Janet did hit the button on the programs, especially the salary people, and how that's going to extend because of the way contracts happen, if it's going to blend in or into the following years. And from what the answers I'm getting is, unless it's part of it, from Ains 1 and Ains 2, it's blending into that last year, that 1 month going into next school year, those funds disappear. And that's what I understood from that previous conversation. So the other question is, other services like subscriptions or from services coming from the service centers may blend into the next year. Do those automatically stop, or could they be extended until the subscription services are complete?
So the EANS 1 grant ends on September 30th of 2023. And so everything's on a glide path right now to allow us to wrap up through the end of this school year. And then there'll be some additional wrap up and things being spent down as we're wrapping up through the end of that September 30th of this year. Which I think maybe is kind of where some of the confusion is coming from, with trying to keep folks on a little bit after that. But as far as subscriptions go, no, anything, we can't do anything with EANS 1 with regards to subscriptions or services. Certainly after September 30th of this year, 2023, that's a hard stop.
Okay. The other big issue that is out there's a lot of rumors and swirling out there, and we also look at what different states are doing under Ains. Any equipment that was purchased by a private school has to have a liquidation plan. Some states are already starting that, and it could be my misunderstanding, but there needs to be a plan in place sometime in the fall. Is there any conversation or recommendations coming down from either the service centers or someone that we start negotiating about those equipment, so everything's in place? So whether it's going to be paid through the service centers or how that process is going to work. Some states are reverting the equipment back to title programs. But that's a state's decision. That's going to be a big issue because some of the schools did rely heavily on equipment and some is in technology. We're trying to be proactive here. We don't want to wait till the last minute. So what is your plan?
So you go ahead, Tate. I'll let you cover this one.
We're in the process of developing that. Basically, we're going to follow the guidance from the United States Department of Education. So once we receive all the inventories from each building that we've requested in EANS 1, we'll take that and we will develop a form that our private schools will need to fill out. We're working on trying to make it as simple as possible, because basically the guidance is stating that if there is still a COVID use for certain equipment, which we're guessing mostly will be the computers, and the private schools can show that need is continuing on, we will be able to allow the private schools to use that equipment going forward, which the Kansas State Department of Education will continue to have to inventory those. So at this point, that's kind of what our process is. So we've got to get it all in place and written down, but we would not be expecting to take back any equipment or computers, anything of that like, unless the private school no longer has a COVID use tied to this, such as the learning loss and stuff. So it's not in writing, but that's basically what we're working on right now. And we hope end of February, 1st of March, have something out officially.
Okay. I may have misunderstood at some of my meetings, but that process in other states, I say that from the federal level, that process should be started in the fall. Is that your anticipation, or?
We would have to have it in
a year
place.
after that, right?
We'd have to have it in place before the fall, because
Okay.
currently we'd have to be picking up that equipment October 1st, if not earlier.
Okay,
So that's why we want it to be done, and we're going to try to make it as simple for our private schools to do.
And we anticipate that a lot of the private schools, and that's why we're reaching out early, is a lot of the private schools probably will have a need, a legitimate need going past September 30th, and we'll be able to continue to utilize that property.
I have two more questions. One is going back to some of the programs that are in place. The aspect of, say, summer school, I'll give that example, or even some tutoring services after school programs. Some schools have found more of a need to expand those programs because either identifying more students or more students coming into the program, into the schools. There seems to be a misunderstanding. Can there be a request to make those changes as long as the money is available within their budgets?
Well, we don't go strictly by budgets, but yeah, if they have things that have been unfilled, we've approved many change requests for additional hours for summer school and after school programs.
Okay.
And
Okay,
one of the keys
it
with
would
kind
be
of what you're
really-
saying with the funds that are left, that's one of the big things is we have to make sure we don't run out of funds, or we have to start releasing teachers during the 23-24 school year. So that's why we have to make sure we have plenty of funds left to get us through the 23-24 school year.
And that makes sense. I understand that, but I'm asking them, perhaps maybe communication should be sent out to the private schools, because I think there's a misunderstanding out there. You know, what they can or cannot do. You
And we
can send
can
it to
try,
me,
but
I'll
also
check it out.
we need updated email addresses. We've been having a lot of bounce backs.
Okay.
So you have new
Would
principals.
you
please
send
have
something
them
to
send
me
it
and
to us.
Janet? We could send it out.
Yep, we can do that. But it has
Thank
to go to all the buildings, not just your diocese.
No, I'm talking about, Janet and I did this before. We sent it out to all the,
Yeah, not a problem.
we'll do that. Janet, am I speaking up too much for you?
No, no, you're good.
And so, you answered most of my questions, but, we just want to be proactive. And, we want to make sure that there's a little bit more conversation. A lot of the buildings, don't understand that what they may have left in funding. But, that will always be helpful. I understand the inventories were completed last week. And so I think it gave a little bit more clarity of what's in the buildings and what's coming up in the future. So, basically, those are the concerns we had.
Okay, and
Janet, anything else?
I'm a little confused because no building has funding. They have services.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry. But, and that brings the other question I forgot.
Okay.
There's a lot of talk in other states about auditing, the private schools. Our take in this state, we don't have funds. You just brought that up. So any auditing would go through the service centers?
Yeah, but it still might include some of you like the physical equipment and stuff. So
Okay,
your private schools per se wouldn't be audited, but you might have to provide information through an audit of the service centers or KSDE.
okay, that's what makes sense.
Mhm.
Janet, do you have anything else?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, I see no reason to postpone the June 1st request. And we're getting fairly close to losing a quorum. So, Bert, if you want to make a motion, have at it.
I move that we instigate a June 1st deadline for the ESSER 2 funds to be in the works.
Adam Thomas, second.
Okay, that motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? That motion carries unanimously. So apparently we're not going to have to worry about that next month, Doug.
Okay, good enough. We'll roll with that.
And I will apologize. Adam Thomas will be chairing the meeting next month. I'm going to be suffering someplace on the Mediterranean in Italy, and will probably not want to, may not have the opportunity to sign in at this particular time, and that will be the downside of that opportunity, that I'll not get to see you next month, but I'll try to be back by April. In that case, we are adjourned.